Hello and welcome to our election special To The Point. Today we have with us a young Turk from the ruling Congress, a person who has been a minister in the outgoing UPA government, an MOS for IT and communications, a two-term MP from South Mumbai seeking re-election from the same constituency again, Mr. Milind Deora. So welcome to Rajya Sabha TV.
Thank you.
It's the peak of election campaigning, so let's begin with certain election-related issues, and I would love to start with your constituency. South Mumbai is considered a high-profile constituency. A lot of issues and events related to this constituency are etched in public memory, be it the horrific incident of 26/11, the recent case of the Kempa Kola Society, and the infamous Adarsh Society scam as well. So how does it feel to get associated with such a high-profile constituency, representing it for twice and then again seeking re-election?
Well, South Mumbai has always been prestigious as a constituency from not now but maybe for 30 or 40 years. Primarily because it's the economic nerve center of India, and it's primarily driven by economic activity. Whether you are one of the wealthiest and biggest industrialists in the country, whether you are a panwala in Kumbharwada, it is driven by economic activity, and as a result there's so many high profile institutions in this constituency, from the Bombay Stock Exchange, the diamond community which has now moved to BKC but still live in South Mumbai.
The roots are still here.
The roots are still here. The large industrialists of the country still live here. At the same time, it's got very old institutions economically. It's got the old cloth bazaar of even India, one could argue, in South Mumbai, in Bhuleshwar, Kalba Devi.
So what have been the challenges so far? 2 terms. You served the constituency for 2 terms.
The biggest challenge and the greatest opportunity at the same time is representing South Mumbai in all its diversity, because I think no other political party today who's fighting this election has the ability to reach out to all sections of South Mumbai. Mm-hmm. Every other party is only focusing on campaign in one area, in one constituency, either by economic or by social indicators. I am the only candidate who's reaching out and trying to reach out, and has always managed to get the support of different communities, regardless of which religion they belong to, which language they speak, what work they do. And that's a fundamental difference between my party and me in South Mumbai, and between other candidates and their parties in South Mumbai.
But one of the major issues which has been in the forefront in this particular constituency, in this part of the city, is redevelopment, because this is, as you pointed out, the oldest part of the city, so-called. Redevelopment is a major issue. Now, your critics argue that Mr. Deora has represented this seat for almost 2 terms now, 10 years. He was part of the government. You're part of the government out there in center. UPA ruled for 10 years. There has been a coalition government in Maharashtra as well for almost. What stopped Mr. Deora from ensuring that the redevelopment issue is taken care of?
Well, firstly, I think the conventional debate on redevelopment, because South Mumbai has a lot of old buildings or chawls, which are protected by the Rent Control Act, and as a result the tenants pay very little rent. The landlords don't have money to repair these buildings. In spite of that, we moved the state in. We got the government involved in this. Mm-hmm. Technically it's between tenants and landlords, mm-hmm. but we are the first people and politicians who brought the state involved into this. Mm-hmm. And the conventional wisdom was, let's take one building. So if you go to a congested part of my constituency, say in Khetwadi, say in Mumbai Devi, say in Umarkhadi, there are a lot of these congested these buildings, and the areas are very congested also. And when one of these old buildings is redeveloped and extra FSI is added onto that area, what it does is suddenly the population of that area increases, mm-hmm. but the roads are the same size. The drainage and other infrastructure underneath the road are of the same size, and that puts tremendous strain on the infrastructure of the area. So for the last few years, we've been seeing that when one building comes up and other buildings don't get redeveloped, the entire area suffers. Therefore, I am proud to say that I worked with the state government to create a very unique cluster development policy, which will look at redeveloping not one building at a time, but a cluster or a block at a time. And that's the way every city, whether it's New York or Shanghai or anywhere or Singapore, have always had urban regeneration and urban renewal programs. They've always taken block by block development. And as a pilot phase, we are doing the entire Nal Bazar, Bhindi Bazar redevelopment, which will provide thousands of people new homes. It will allow them to have transit accommodation in the area itself. It will allow the entire cluster to be planned properly. So there will be arterial roads. There will be much better infrastructure. There will be rainwater harvesting. The underground pipelines of water, sanitation, drainage will be commensurate to the extra FSI being added on. And you will basically create a mini city in the middle of Mumbai.
So you're saying that you've started the work, but it's slow because it is going to take a lot of time. There's a lot of work which needs to be done.
Well, one is, fine-tuning these policies isn't easy because these policies are done in a public-private partnership. It's not that the government invests the money. The private person invests, the government gets revenue out of it. So how do you fine-tune the policy to have the right set of incentives that give the private developer the ability to redevelop this area, but at the same time take care of the infrastructure and invest in that infrastructure?
But the government does play an important role, and out here, obviously, since it's out here in Maharashtra, if it were in any other city, the state government more per se plays a very important role. Are you satisfied with the kind of support or the kind of work which has been done by the state government, not only on this front but on others as well?
Well, I think on the cluster redevelopment policy, I'm very, very satisfied. I think the Chief Minister in particular has gone out of his way to make it a very robust and a very attractive policy. And I can assure the people of not just Mumbai, but the people of cities in other parts of India that the Bhindi Bazar redevelopment project, which is being done by a trust, not by a private developer, will become a very important precedent for urban renewal of chawls, of slums, of dilapidated structures, not just in South Mumbai, but in the entire urban landscape of India.
You say that you're satisfied with the kind of support you've got from the Chief Minister State Government, but I'm reminded of a statement which was made by you in the recent past that the Chief Minister and the State Government could have done more, could have done it faster.
Well, I do admit that I think in the first three, because he's been Chief Minister now for 3.5 years, and I think the first year and a half, 2 years, a lot of people felt that the pace of the way things were working in the state government weren't as fast as they should have been. But I believe, it's not easy to, it's easy to criticize somebody, but ultimately when you take a politician who's working in the Prime Minister's office as a Minister of State and suddenly move them to another state and put them as Chief Minister there, and that person has to work with a whole new set of legislators, a whole new set of challenges of urban, rural, and as the leader of that state, is not working as a deputy minister under the leader of that particular government. There are fundamental differences. And I think the Chief Minister has taken time, but he's finally, I think, settled into his own shoes. And now he's found a good rhythm to work with his coalition partner. He's found a good rhythm to work with legislators from different parties in the state. And I think he's got a better sense now of the challenges confronting Mumbai and the other parts of Maharashtra.
Okay, great. We'll take a short break here, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Milind. And this time around, we'll ask him about the role of young Turks in the party. He's amongst one of them. Welcome back. Young Congress leader Milind Deora is still with us. Milind, let's now come to something about party politics. Since the time Rahul Gandhi has taken charge as Vice President, and even slightly before that as well, there were young people in the party who were projected, people like Milind Deora, people like Sachin Pilot, people like Jyotiraditya Scindia, Jiten Prasad, RPN Singh, a number of names, even Jiten Singh. And most of you made it as ministers in the UPA government in its second tenure. First thing which I would like to know is, how successful do you think this entire experiment has been of giving more space to the young faces, both in the party and the government?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't call it an experiment. I think it's something which was inevitable. It should have happened. It should have happened perhaps a longer time ago, and I'm glad it happened. I think, different people have performed differently, but I think generally what works well in any organization, especially in governments, and especially in our government where the Prime Minister and the leader of the government was an experienced politician. It's good to have a good mix of younger people working with under Dr. Manmohan Singh's leadership. And I think in that sense, whether you look at, if I can tell you about my own performance in the Ministry of Communications and IT, and recently as a Minister of State in the Ministry of Shipping, there have been many, many initiatives that we've begun, had the freedom to begin, with the guidance of the Prime Minister, that I think are going to change this country. I think in the area of teledensity, connecting more and more Indians to the internet, connecting more people to mobile phones, regulating radiation from these mobile phones and handsets, having a huge e-governance program, which will reduce the human interface between citizen and government, reduce corruption, improve transparency, improve governance. Even in shipping, to attract investments in the port sector. I'm proud to say that there's a lot that we've achieved, and I think it's a very good mix for any government and any organization, frankly, even outside of politics, to have a good, healthy mix of age, experience, and youth and enthusiasm.
Is that a healthy mix as of now? Because the arguments are that in the Congress party, it is old guard versus the youth brigade.
No, I don't see that at all. I've never seen that in 10 years. When I became an MP the first time in 2004, I remember I was given a chance to initiate the debate in Parliament on the historic RTI, on the Right to Information Bill in Parliament in 2005 May. Just 1 year after being an MP for the first time. I was 28 years old. I was asked to speak by my party leader, by the Prime Minister. So there's never been I've never experienced any kind of discrimination based on my age. I've always seen a lot of guidance from those who are the elders.
You may not have experienced it to yourself, but there is a comparison which is being made out between the time when Rajiv Gandhi, the late Prime Minister, took over after Indira Gandhi's death, and the difficulties he faced for bringing in new changes vis-a-vis the old guard. People say that it's almost deja vu. Rahul is facing the same trouble in the party for bringing in new changes, specifically with respect to the organization with the old guard of the party. Is that what it is?
I don't see that, because Rahul Gandhi has many years ago embarked on a lot of reforms in the party. Nobody stopped him. Nobody came in his way. People encouraged those ideas. Mr. Gandhi suggested many changes even to government, to relook at the way we direct subsidies, looking at direct benefits transfer, Aadhaar, bringing in experts from the private sector to run important critical reform-driven agendas of the government. So I've never seen any of that. There is, of course, a transitional change happening in our party. And there is a transitional change happening with regards to even age, you can argue. But none of the younger leaders, including Mr. Gandhi, are ever saying we are going to ignore the wisdom of the elders and just do things on our own. The transition is happening very smoothly. It's happening very cooperatively. It's happening while taking elders into consideration.
But some of the experiments put into place by Mr. Gandhi vis-a-vis how to tackle the organization, such as the most recent one and a very significant one, that's holding primaries in at least 15 to 16 constituencies, seems to have gone utterly wrong. Specifically, if I talk about your state, because there were constituencies which were chosen, then rechosen, then again rechosen. So was the party not sure about what it is getting into, or this was something which was taken as one-off experiments which could, if at all, make sense?
No, see, it's a new concept, not for our party, it's a new concept for India. Today, no political party, be it a recently formed party or be it a very old party, has a concept of primaries. We are trying to adopt a system that doesn't exist in India. We're trying to adopt a system that exists in Western democracies, primarily in the US, where the party has a larger say in determining who should be a candidate. of course, this is a pilot project and this is an experiment. Our aim and our goal is that in few years' time, hopefully in 5 years' time, every election that we fight as a party, whether it's a parliamentary election, a state election, a municipal election, a panchayat election, will be fought and based on what the party decides through a primary. So as I said, there is a generational change happening in our party. I don't deny that. Is that healthy? Definitely. Are we doing it in the right way? I believe so. I believe we're trying to do it in a cooperative way. Look at what's happening in other parties. Look at what's happening in our principal opposition party. There's also a generational change happening there.
Yes,
but look at how they're going about that generational change. It's being gone about in a very arrogant way.
Are you pointing towards the treatment meted out to the BJP patriarch, Mr. Advani?
Well, obviously, since you assumed that, then that's obviously the case. If a senior leader like Mr. Advani, who's has so many years under his belt of experience of, for whatever it's worth, we may differ ideologically with the party, but for having built that party, is suddenly being told you have no say in this party. You can't decide where to contest elections from. You can't decide what the strategy of the party should be. Senior leaders like Mr. Jaswant Singh, you can't decide which seat to choose. You won't even be consulted. It's this or that. Of course, that's a wrong way to have a transition, and that would be a wrong way to have a transition, again, not just in a political party, but maybe even in a business organization, maybe in any organization. Any good organization that's going through a generational change and a transition, the passing of the baton should be done very smoothly, very maturely. And that maturity has to come from both parts. It has to come from the seniors and the elders. And more importantly, it has to come from the youth and the people who the baton is being passed on.
Okay, so that's a very important comparison which you are making out here between the BJP and Congress. We'll take a short break again out here. When we come back, we will go ahead and have a conversation with Milind on the importance of having personalities in elections. Is it only personalities who matter, or is it also the issues? Welcome back. Milind Deora is still with us. Milind, let me talk about your party leader, the vice president, the one under whose leadership the party is fighting these elections, Mr. Rahul Gandhi. You made a statement once, and that was a very significant statement, that it would have been better if Rahul Gandhi would have joined the government. One, do you still believe that what you said still holds water? Two, if he would have done so, would things have been different at this point in time today with just a few days to go before people start voting?
Well, I said that recently because I believe things would have been different today. I believe, as I said earlier, that if Mr. Gandhi got into government in 2009, that's my personal view, there would have been a very healthy mix of leadership under Dr. Manmohan Singh and Mr. Gandhi. And again, like I said earlier, it would have been a very healthy mix of the enthusiasm that youth brings to the table and the wisdom and experience that seniors and elders bring to the table. But there's no point talking about what could have happened and should have happened.
Would it also have been a little helpful in countering the personality cult attack which is coming in from your opposition party, because given the fact that the BJP has portrayed Mr. Modi as a prime ministerial candidate, your party again saying that this is not in our tradition, has not portrayed anyone per se, but it is more so clear that if at all the party comes back to power, Mr. Rahul Gandhi might end up being the prime ministerial candidate of the party. But then if he would have joined the government, as you pointed out earlier, would it have given him more of a legitimacy to that stated position? Or rather, unstated position?
Well, firstly, as 2004 has taught us, nothing is set in stone. And before the 2004 elections, everyone assumed Mrs. Gandhi is vying for the Prime Minister's chair. And she's the face of the party. Although a Prime Ministerial candidate hadn't been announced by us even then, Vajpayee ji was a sitting Prime Minister. People assumed if Congress came to power, she'll be Prime Minister. We won the elections, we formed a coalition, every coalition ally supported her, openly made statements that we are open and happy to have Mrs. Gandhi as Prime Minister. She said, I don't want to be Prime Minister. I don't have the greed for becoming Prime Minister. So these are things which, it's not just a cliched statement or political rhetoric. These are genuine things which which the party has to sit down and decide once things happen. That's our tradition. Today, BJP is projecting Mr. Modi. If BJP gets a certain number of seats, but at the last minute, the allies feel we don't want Mr. Modi as Prime Minister and we want a more moderate face as Prime Minister, all that projection and that promise that that he's the Prime Ministerial candidate means nothing.
But are you indicating that if at all the Congress gets the numbers to form the government again in 2014, there can be, I'm saying can be, a repeat of what happened in 2004?
Frankly, I don't know. I frankly don't have the answer to that.
Well, you have a lot of answers as far as that particular circle is concerned.
No, I really don't have an answer to that. And I don't know what is...
A number of statements made by you have finally come true.
Those are pure flukes and those are pure coincidences, which I'm happy to take credit for, but they're not true. And I don't know if anybody has a sense of whether if we come to power, Mr. Gandhi would want to be Prime Minister, or would there be an alternative Prime Minister? I don't think anyone has a sense of that. I think we are going into it very sincerely. We aren't going in to play games with the people of India. Mm-hmm. I think we understand that India's system of parliamentary democracy doesn't allow for a personality contest. It doesn't allow for a popularity contest of one individual. And we are really going to the people with what we think are our achievements, how things have changed for people in the last decade. And we are going in with a collective leadership, and that's something which is fundamentally different from what we are projecting and what they are projecting. Okay. And I believe we are doing it in a humble, realistic, achievable way. And I believe they are doing it in a arrogant, unrealistic way, almost reminiscent of what they did in 2004. But that's something they have to decide, and that's something which only on the 16th of May we'll know. Okay, so can we say that congressmen like you are keeping their fingers crossed? For post May 16th? Yeah. Well, I, for example, when I fought my first election in 2004, and I remember at that time, Vajpayee ji was Prime Minister of India, and I think BJP had 186 seats, if I'm not mistaken. And almost every projection, every opinion poll was suggesting that they would go to 220 as a party, and then NDA, of course, would be much more than that. And they came down to 138. We had 145, and then again cut to 2009. Parties were suggesting that we will remain in a 130 to 150 level, and that NDA would surge a bit. And from 145, we went up to 207. So my limited point, and based on my experience, is that it's very tough to poll a diverse, heterogeneous country like India. Corruption has been an issue. I hope you would not deny that. Inflation also has been an issue. And would you agree, in short, that both these issues are going to be, costing you a lot? It's going to be a lot of pinching pain for the Congress party as far as corruption and inflation is concerned. Well, I think for one, the way I look at the corruption debate today in the country is it's a lot of rhetoric. It's more of, are you for the Lokpal? Are you against the Lokpal? If you ask most people what the Lokpal is about and how the Lokpal will help improve corruption, most people won't even be able to tell you what the answer is. But what about fielding clean candidates? Your party is again given ticket to ex-Chief Minister Ashok Chavan and therefore the others can. No, so let me say one thing. So I think no party can claim to be, perfect. Including yours? Including mine. No political party is perfect when it comes to not corruption. I think my party has exhibited a great sense of leadership on tackling corruption. We've removed people when they were accused. We have enacted a whole set of legislations, not only Lokpal more recently, but back in 2005, as I said, when I initiated the right to information debate. I think, when parties say we are going to fight corruption, they're not really answering the real question, and the real question is how are you changing the systems in the country? But your party has also not taken the final steps by giving tickets to Pawan Bansal in Chandigarh, Ashok Chavan. Well, see, as I said, when I spoke out, if you remember, against the ordinance which would allow convicted people to continue to remain MPs and MLAs, I took that because there's a grey area in our country, and anywhere in the world for that matter, which is who should be allowed to contest and not contest. Should a person who's an accused be allowed to contest or not contest, or should that apply only to convicted people? This is politics. Politics is a tough profession. It's a profession where mud is thrown at people's faces every single day. Even if you're a clean person, you can have mud thrown at you, or ink nowadays. the point is, ultimately parties have to decide, and the country has to decide, frankly, that is an allegation against somebody, does that mean I'm going to not allow a person to contest the election? If the answer is yes, what will happen if every politician has an allegation against them? Nobody will be able to contest the election. So therefore, when I took a stand, and I fought against,
yardsticks for Ashok Chavan and Suresh Kalmadi?
well, that's something the party has decided, frankly. I'm not aware of why the party decided on A versus B. We as a country have to debate, and as I say again, we as a country means political parties, the public, civil society, on what is a common minimum agenda for who should be given and not being given a ticket. I firmly believe in that. Is an accusation enough to debar someone from getting a ticket? Is a charge sheet enough to debar someone? Is a conviction enough? I think there's a grey area in that. Different people have different opinions on that. When I took a stand against the ordinance, which I was telling you about, which would have allowed convicted MPs and MLAs to remain in power, for me there was no grey area in that. Although one can argue, and although the argument on the other side was that a convicted MP or MLA by a lower court whose appeal is pending before a higher court may be acquitted by the higher court, but it may take 10, 20 years, by which time their political career would be over. But I still said, on a matter of principle, even though it's a lower court, even though it might be politically motivated cases, a conviction is a conviction. And at least someone who's convicted of a crime and sentenced to over 2 years of imprisonment should not be given a ticket. And I'm more than happy if political parties, including my own, come together and take a call on what is a common minimum agenda for who should be given a ticket and who should not.
Wonderful. Let's hope that this grey area is taken care of, as hopeful as Milind out here is, one of the young Turks of the Congress party who was with us in a freewheeling conversation on a number of issues. We'll come back next week with a different personality from a different place. Keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.